Podcast number 3, student enrolls and the response to intervention.
All right. What happens when a student enrolls for school?
So when a student first enrolls in school, the release of records is sent to their previous school asking for all their records. Whether it's transcripts, IEP, any special education paperwork, it is sent. Schools cannot, the previous school cannot hold on to special education paperwork if fees are owed. It is against the law, and the other school can be held liable. So the parents will request it. If all the other documentation is sent and we still haven't received the special education paperwork, then we will make a second request. Sometimes we will call the parent and ask the parent, could you also go and ask for that copy? If sometimes we don't get that right away, the student will self-identify themselves.
Right.
And then we will furthermore look for that paperwork. If the parent is concerned that their student's not receiving services and they should be, then I encourage the parents to reach out to me, Mrs. Miller-Willis, and let me know where this paperwork's coming from, and that way I can then go search for it.
Okay, so the next question is basically the same, really. What does the director of SPED Education do in order to find the paperwork?
So when the parent contacts me because the paperwork was never sent, for me, I have this access to Ohio District Data Exchange. You'll hear me call it ODEX. I can, if a student has been in Ohio and has attended an Ohio school, I can look and see where that paperwork should be coming from.
Okay.
So when the parent tells me, I contact the previous school with the release of records and, letting them know, hey, I really need this paperwork for this student. And we get it then that way. But having that access to that ODEX system has really sped up the process of getting the paperwork from the other school.
Okay, what if a student needs special education service? What's the process?
So this is the process we call this. You can hear it in two different terms. We either call it the response to intervention, or RTI, or it might be called the pre-referral process. This is to ensure that the student has tried reasonable accommodations in the classroom before being referred to special education services. So one of the things is that there's like this pyramid. It's called the RTI model, and it's done in tiers. The bottom tier, if you had 100 students in the 8th grade, the teacher should be doing some kind of progress monitoring. So like for here at our schools, we do Renaissance testing.
Right.
In that Renaissance testing, you should be able to see what students are struggling and that need more intervention. The classroom teachers then provide their own interventions to help those students. So if you have 100 students, you might see maybe like 20 of them still struggling. So in that first tier 1, you have 20 students who were struggling according to Renaissance. So you're going to provide them just standard accommodations, maybe frequent breaks or seat close to the instructor, or you might provide a read aloud at times for them. And then they're supposed to be documenting those interventions and determining which students are still struggling out of those 20. And so you then move into that tier 2, which is called targeted interventions. So out of the 20 students that you have identified as struggling, you might find that 10 of them are still kind of struggling. And in those, you're going to intensify the interventions. You're going to provide more interventions in the classroom. Once you've done that and you've done your documentation, you then identify about 5% of those students, so we're talking maybe 2 to 5 students still, who might need to move into more intensive interventions. And this is where special education comes in. We call this tier 3 interventions. This is where special education is going to step in and start saying, okay, we need to meet with the school psychologist, we need to get an IQ test, we need to get a reading, math, and writing skill grade level test. We like to use the Woodcock-Johnson, which is a test that breaks down their reading, writing, and math skills. And then we move into getting things signed from the parent that we can move forward with the school psych. There is documentation that teachers have to follow with this. They're provided with a contact log because during tier 1 and tier 2, they need to be contacting the parent themselves. They need to let the parent know that they're seeing these struggles. Special education has provided these documents for them as a standard basis. We've provided documentation to the teachers as well for them to document what interventions they are doing. They have to provide work samples as well with that. So once they've identified this student, and they've determined that, these 5 students may need further special education services, we then have to contact the parent to discuss moving on to special education. And then we would get the parent to sign the parent consent. Once we get that parent consent signed, which is we call the PRO5 sometimes as well, we have 60 days to get the ETR, get the student tested with the school psych, get the ETR written, and get the IEP written. Anytime we go out of that, we face liability and failing to provide a free and appropriate education.
Okay.
That's if the teacher recommends testing. If a parent were to say, I want my student tested, I feel they're struggling, from that verbal, it could be verbal or it can be written that they want their student tested, we have 30 days to make a determination if we want to move forward with testing or not. And in those 30 days, teachers will be required to provide interventions and to document what they're seeing as well. So that the state of Ohio really wants to see that documentation in the classroom.
Okay.
So parents have been told, they come in and they say, I want my student tested. Okay, well then let me get with the teachers and get them to fill out the forms to show me what they're seeing, and we'll meet in 30 days to discuss. And then at that meeting, we would get the parent to sign the PRO5 to consent for testing, and then we would move forward for testing if the teachers were seeing it. If the teachers aren't seeing the struggles, then we might move forward with a 504 plan, which I will explain more about that in a later podcast. So we're really big on timelines in special education, so we want to keep in mind that 30 days when a parent requests, and then the 60 days starting the moment we get that PRO5 signed. And then there's more forms that will have to be filled out after that.